Confronting our past can be the scariest thing living life alcohol free. I would say it's probably number two to actually living life without alcohol and not having that crutch to lean on when we need it for stress relief, for coping with life in general. Confronting our past is something that it's necessary, it's vital, and some of us need to go further into depth with that than others. This journey isn't linear, it's kind of jagged and it's kind of up and down for everybody, this alcohol free journey. But you kind of start to understand and recognize what you need to do as far as healing in sobriety when you after you get a little bit of time. I'd say after you get maybe like 3 months alcohol free is when you start to really kind of discover that more about yourself. You kind of start to figure out that this life that I'm living right now, yeah, the present life I'm hitting head on and I'm dealing with it without alcohol, and it's hard and it's difficult, and that's really the white knuckling it, is really the important part of staying sober at the beginning. That's really the main key and the main point. We don't really have to confront our past right away. That's something that comes along later on down the line. There's cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, that people use. And when I was in my 2 years of being alcohol free, I kind of talked to my therapist about maybe doing that. She was open to the idea of trying that, but she said it was going to take a lot of work. It's going to more than just regular week to week therapy. It's going to take a daily thing to go back, because you have to literally go back into that period of time in your life where the trauma existed and really introspect into that. And she gave me a couple tips and pointers on what I could do, and I kind of used them, and I kind of worked on it for a few weeks while I was in therapy, because I didn't go to therapy from about 6 months alcohol free until I got to about 2 years. I kind of went for one or two visits at 1 year because I was at that 1 year milestone. For whatever reason, I was starting to feel a little bit uneasy. Not that I was going to drink, but I really wasn't sure if I wanted to celebrate 1 year. I wasn't sure if I wanted to. Um, I wasn't sure. I just wasn't sure of a lot of things. My goal was to make it to 1 year alcohol free. And so once that approached and I was a few weeks away from it, I just kind of started to feel a little bit uneasy, I guess is the best term I can come up with. But I went in for a couple therapy visits. I really didn't think that it did a whole lot other than maybe kind of help me kind of process things and get to the other side of those anxieties that I was having. I ultimately celebrated my 1 year. My wife and my oldest daughter gave me a card. We celebrated with some non-alcoholic sangria, which was pretty gross, by the way. But it was still a good thought. It was still nice to celebrate it. When I got to 2 years, I started to feel that tinge of anxiety again. Like, it's now I'm at 2 years, and I still don't feel like I'm completely healed from this. I feel like there's still things going on in my life that I need to work on. So I went back to therapy and I made an appointment with a different therapist from the one that I had at the beginning of my sobriety. And in those sessions, I she brought a different perspective than my first therapist. My first therapist specialized in drug and alcohol addiction. He himself was an addict, so he understood what I was going through, and he was really the quickest one available. So I took him, not really knowing that was his background. But once I started going to see him, I really related, and he related with me, and it worked out well. But this particular therapist that I had at year two, I wanted a different perspective because being someone who's married and has a family and kids and particularly daughters, I didn't feel like my first therapist really could relate to that part of it, and I really was trying to work out my relationships with them, and I needed someone who could kind of relate from a woman's perspective. And so that's kind of where it started, but it didn't end up there. It ended up in some other places. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was this cognitive behavioral therapy. And because I was still ruminating on things that happened even when I was all the way back as far as high school, and there wasn't anything that was new, but it was something that it was festering, and it always had festered in my 20s and my 30s, and now into my 40s. And I was tired of thinking about certain things that either I made poor choices, or I made a choice to um, a different choice, and then I like maybe regretted it. So there, it's like there's choices you make, and then there's choices that you ignore, and then there's things that you kind of wish that you could know, like what the outcome would have been if you would have made a different choice. Um, so I watched a movie yesterday on Netflix called Past Lives, and the movie really kind of struck a nerve with me, and really made me think about how awesome it was to be able to work on my past, but not really have to go too far into depth with it. I ultimately didn't need to do CBT. I was able to kind of work through my past without really going too far into depth. I don't think that my trauma was so bad that it required that, but I still did some tools, and I still did some techniques that she showed me and taught me, and they really helped. But what this movie kind of talked about was the importance of confronting our past. And since my channel is revolves around sobriety, living a life alcohol free, I felt like I could kind of relate that that story and that movie into this topic. And if you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to watch it, because it really it's all in Korean. I would say 90% of it's in Korean. It's English subtitles or whatever your language is. Um, but it really it shines a light, and it really, these two individuals kind of went different directions, not by choice at a young age, and then they rekindled their kind of bond in their 20s, and then again in their 30s, and they went into depth about like how it was that they were able to come to terms with the fact that it wasn't meant to be for them to be together. And you know, I don't know what your journey looks like exactly, but I know for me that I drank a lot of times because of kind of the losses that I sustained especially in my high school years. And I turned to alcohol to cope with things. And as a result of turning to alcohol to cope with things, I lost other aspects of my life, and I kind of in the process lost myself. And I was able to kind of acknowledge that through therapy, the first session through in my sobriety, but even more so in my second, to the point where I finally was able to start to live more in the present moment and not feel like I needed to rehash those things that happened in my past. That's not to say that thoughts don't come up. I think that we're all human beings. We all have um, regrets. We all have ruminations and things that we maybe wished we would have done differently or better. But the goal in all of this for me was not just stopping drinking and living life alcohol free. It was to knock out the ruminating and come to terms with the fact that I made those choices not when I was younger, not because I was a bad person. In fact, I made a lot of the choices that I made because I was a thoughtful person, and I didn't give myself enough credit at that time. And now I can give myself credit and know that I am emotionally intelligent. I have that. I've had that ability all along. It's just that when I would try to be vulnerable with those in my life that I felt I didn't have good bonds with, I felt like it was a weakness. And one of the things that I realized about 3 years into my sobriety was really the last time I had this like really big cry. And it was like I was just driving home from work, and all of a sudden it just hit me. All of the things that I had built up over these past few years started to really like just all come to a head, and I had to pull off on the side of the road and let it all out. And I got home and I texted my group, and one of the comments said, "That's called an emotional purge, and it's actually a good thing." A lot of times we suppress that cry. We kind of, because of pride, or because it's just ridiculous that we care or think that deeply about something. But the truth of the matter is that if it's important, it's important. And if we feel strongly about it, then we need to just let that out. And in that movie, um, he he missed this girl, and he cried. He was at dinner with his friends, and he just started crying. And two of them were kind of teasing him, but the one, his best friend, just put his hand on his shoulder and said, "Let it all out. Cry it all out." And he did. And that didn't ultimately like solve all of his problems, but it gave him clarity. And that's what it does for us. It gives us a little bit of clarity, like that really means something to me. Maybe I need to do something about that. Of course, this is a movie, it's not real life. So he makes a trip from Korea to New York 25 years later to rekindle, or not rekindle, but like talk to her about this, all of this that had been going on. And she kind of felt the same way. Like they had a date that their moms set up at a young age. It was the last memory that they had before she immigrated to Canada and ultimately to the United States. And it was interesting, because she kind of just was numb to it all and just left. And he was just left standing there like, really? She doesn't even really care. It didn't seem like, but ultimately she did, and they were able to kind of work it out and talk it out. And it was just eye opening, because how often do we think about our past, and how often do we drink because of the past hurts? And how do we get to a place where we're okay with the way that we left things? We're okay with the way that things ultimately went. And that's really one of the biggest things, I think, in recovery is, and like I said, it can be something as small as like a relationship ending, but it could also be how our parents treated us. It could also be um, things that we didn't do right with school, or with anything. It could be anything, and it could also be things that are out of our control. I did have some like friends on my sober groups that were afraid to go back to their childhood trauma because of what it would open up. And it can be stressful to do that. And I think the best part about doing that alcohol free is that we can actually get to the bottom of it, and we're not using alcohol to help us um, numb to it. So it's kind of a stepping stone, quitting drinking and moving to the next step. And I think you'll know when you're ready to talk about it. Like, it doesn't just happen like right now. It takes some time. And there's some YouTubers and some sobriety channels that I follow. I noticed that a lot of them use like really negative stuff about alcohol to, not all, but some of them use, a lot of their titles are negative. A lot of the like shocking, and like alcohol is so bad and this and that. And but I don't want to use alcohol as just bad, because I feel like it's better to look at it like life is just better without alcohol. I feel like it's more empowering for us to look at life like, um, we're not missing anything if we're not drinking. And that's kind of how I've approached my life, my alcohol free life, my sobriety life, my recovery, whatever you want to call it. And been able to come to like terms with what happened in my past. A lot of the reasons why I drank in the years before I quit, the say like the 5 or 6 years before I quit drinking, was because of my behavior. I was kind of not liking my personality anymore. I didn't like the way alcohol was making me feel. I was angry a lot. I was irritable. The hangovers were getting worse, and all of that stuff just made it to the point where alcohol wasn't serving me anymore. It was making me feel worse than I would have if I just was able to quit it and just be alcohol free. Because the days that I didn't drink, I felt a million times better. That panic and anxiety weren't there. I didn't feel like I was saying the things that I was saying when I was drinking, and I wasn't reacting and responding to comments and things that people were saying to me. And I wasn't responding well to anything. So I had to come to terms with most of that stuff first. My present, I dealt with the present first, and the immediate past first. And then as the years went on, and I started to recognize that, hey, I don't really want to ruminate about decisions and things that happened when I was 15 years old anymore. And that's ultimately when I started drinking, when I was 15. So a lot of the things that happened between like 15 and 20 were things that I kind of ruminated about for the rest of my life, and it kept me drinking. And it's really weird because I drank because I kind of wanted to rekindle my youth, but I also drank because I regretted a lot of the things that happened in my youth, and a lot of it revolved around the problems that I had with drinking and other things. So that's what I got for you today. I'm glad that you guys are all here. Please like and subscribe if you found value in this video. Come check out some of my other videos. I'll pin the link to that playlist in the comments below. I'll also pin the link to my private Facebook group, Sobriety in the Storm, down in the comments below. You can join there. That's a group where it's separate from this channel. It's private, so it's not all out there. If there's things that you want to share that you don't feel like sharing here, or if you just need 24/7 camaraderie, uh, encouragement, and motivation to stay alcohol free, it's a great group. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate you taking the time to watch, and we'll see you on the next one. Have a great day.